there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a book haul for the past few months in book shopping. This will include a few books that I got as gifts, some books that I won, and Mara from Books Like Whoa did a giveaway, and I never win anything, but I won her draw, so that was exciting. And also the books that I picked up at Book Outlet's Boxing Day sale. My sister and my nephew flew in on Boxing Day, and you'd think, well, we went to visit, or, you know, we went to a restaurant. No, we drove out to St. Catharines and went to Book Outlet because everything there, which obviously is already discounted, was an additional 50% off. And they actually had a full week-long sale, but it was basically first come, first served. So we had to go on Boxing Day so that we could pick up books. And I did pick up quite a lot. Although before that, I'm going to mention the one thing that I bought myself that wasn't from that sale. That was very exciting because it's something that I mentioned in a tag a while ago. Because there was a question about what book do you regret not buying or something like that. And I always give the answer of The Absolute Authority, which had been out of print, and I so regretted not buying it because on the secondary market it was in the realm of, you know, $200+. But they re-released it, and it was on sale, 50% off. So this was normally $99 Canadian retail, but I got it for actually less than 50% off because I got it for $44. This is a collection of Warren Ellis and Bryan Hitch's run on The Authority, which was the original 12 issues. Slipcased. I'm gonna slide it out here. It's ultra large sized. It's a nice hardcover inside. The print quality and the color quality is just beautiful. I regretted not buying this when it was released the first time, but yeah, here we go. Now I have this, and I'm ridiculously excited about that. And I got it at a great price, so you definitely can't complain about that. So as I said, my sister was visiting, and she brought me two books that she had read and finished and thought I would enjoy, and those are Han Kang's Human Acts. This has really made the rounds on BookTube. It's set in South Korea in the 80s, in the aftermath of student protests where someone is searching for their friend's body, I believe. Yeah, so I'm definitely curious to read this. Looking at the back sticker, so I know that my sister bought this at a used bookstore. And secondly was the other book that she brought me was Andrew Sean Greer's Less. This won the Pulitzer this past year. This has made the rounds on a lot of corners of BookTube. I've heard some mixed reviews of this, although they've mostly been positive. It's about a middle-aged failed novelist. I think it's about this character's midlife crisis. So I'll be curious to read that and see which of the two sides I've heard of reviews of that I end up falling into. That wasn't great phrasing. Anyway, next up were the books that I won through Mara's giveaway. If you haven't checked out her channel, Books Like Whoa, you should go check it out. She talks about an extremely wide variety of genres and types of writing. What I think is most entertaining about her channel is that she will talk about genres like category romances and whodunits in a much more serious way than most people discuss them, and I find that really interesting because I think that's the style of writing that most people talk about exclusively for entertainment value and whether it was fun or not, because it's not considered anything that's deeper. When people are talking about literary fiction, they tend to be doing more evaluation, and when people are talking about fiction for children, for example, there tends to be more discussion about the message and what's being taught. I think mysteries and romances tend to be brushed off a little bit more as purely entertainment, so I think her discussions of those genres are really interesting because she's willing to go beyond the entertainment value. In any case, let me show you what she sent me. First up is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, which everybody's been talking about, I think because there's a Netflix TV series of this now, which is apparently very different from the book. I've never read this, so I'm looking forward to it. It's generally considered a classic of suspense, so yeah, I'll be excited to get to that. Next up is Susan Dennard's Sightwitch, which is part of a young adult fantasy series. I'm not usually a big fan of young adult fantasy, but I've heard some entertainingly mixed reviews of this from different people, so I'm interested to see where those different views come from, because I always enjoy thinking about that kind of thing. And there are some illustrations in here which look nice, which I hadn't realized, so that will be fun to look at. Next up is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, which I think Mara said she hasn't read yet but is going to read. So I'm looking forward to getting to this and to comparing what we think of this. I believe this is an urban fantasy slash speculative fiction piece because it's set in the future but involves clairvoyance in the seedy underbelly of London in 2059. That sounds like fun. And finally was Volume 1 of March, which is John Lewis's graphic memoir about his involvement in the civil rights movement. I actually used to own this and don't anymore. I was kind of disappointed in myself with having gotten rid of it because I wanted to lend this to both my mother and my sister, because my mother actually went to university in the United States in the 60s. And so I've been planning to get it out of the library, and now I don't need to because I have this. So thank you very much to Mara for both hosting the contest and for sending these to me, because I know it was really expensive to mail them to Canada, so I really appreciate that, so thank you. Next up, the book outlet haul. This will take a while because everything was incredibly cheap. Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Everybody knows what this is. I am not a huge fan of the Brontë sisters, and I have never actually finished this, and it was 74 cents, so I decided I will finish this, and I will try to tie the book to the name, as opposed to tying the Laurence Olivier film, which is apparently nothing like the book, to the name, because that is my main association. Oh, Scalped, Casino Boogie. This is Volume 2 of a Vertigo series by Jason Aaron, drawn by R.M. Guéra. This is an organized crime on a reserves casino story. I've been kind of turned off by how short a lot of the collections are for this. I feel like this is probably the kind of story that needs to have a longer collection, but for 50% off. Next up is The Sorrow of War by Bao Ninh. This is a, I believe, novelized memoir. The author was in the North Vietnamese army during the late 60s. Of his brigade of 100, he was one of 10 who survived. That is very depressing to hear. I always enjoy a good war novel, especially one that appears to be more of a novelized memoir. That sounds terrible, but you know what I mean. Next up is Julia Alvarez's Something to Declare. I read a novel of hers, a collection of short stories of hers, and a nonfiction work of hers last year, and this, I believe, is a memoir. It's described as confessional essays, half of which are dedicated to her family's life in the Dominican Republic, and then half of which are about her life as a teenager in New York City later on. So that should be interesting. I feel like she's somebody who, when I read her Once Upon a Quinceañera, which was the nonfiction, she included some bits of memoir, which was interesting because some of her memoir-y bits were clearly things that she'd taken inspiration for in her fiction. So I'll be interested to read more of that. Next up is Ken Liu's Wall of... It's falling over, it's so big. The Wall of Storms. This is a fantasy epic. It's the sequel to Grace of Kings, which I own but I haven't read because I bought the hardcover, also at Book Outlet, because it ended up being cheaper, and I wish I'd bought the mass market paperback because this is so bulky that carrying the hardcover is a pain, and that's the only reason I haven't read it. At least this is paperback, even if it's not the smaller mass market one. Next up is Tad Williams' The Heart of What Was Lost. This is a fantasy novella that is set in the same world as his Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series, which I hadn't thought of for years, but then Rick from another book blog, or another book vlog, I forget, but anyway, he did his top 10s tag and mentioned that the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series was, I think, his favorite book of all time, or his favorite series of all time, and I hadn't thought about it in years. I read that back in the 90s, and there are some things that I found memorable about it. There was an interesting use of language. And I remember liking that the one-handed guy was not the villain, because that's a cliche that is still super common, so it was nice that that didn't happen in that one. I suppose that's a minor spoiler, but in any case, this is set in the same world. I haven't read anything from this world in, as I said, a couple of decades, which both makes me feel old and makes me suspect that I won't remember anything, but I think this is set in a different time period, so I don't think I'll need to remember anything. So yeah. Next up is The Case of the Love Commandos by Tarquin Hall. This is in his Vishpuri series. This is a mystery series, and March Mystery Madness is coming up. Although realistically, because I am probably going to be staying in my mother's house through the spring, and she is a huge mystery reader, I didn't need to pick up extra mysteries, but it was $1, so. Next up is Under Heaven by Guy Gavriel Kay. This is another one of his stories that mixes historical fiction and fantasy. He has a version of Earth that is not exactly the historical Earth, but is clearly inspired by specific periods in Earth's history. This is Tang Dynasty China. I haven't read any of these in a long time. I really enjoyed the Sarantine Mosaic, which is the pseudo-Byzantine series. I really liked The Lions of Al-Rasan, which was the El Cid style story. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've read any of these, so I'm looking forward to getting to this and to seeing if I still enjoy this style of his writing as much as I used to. And finally, yet another mystery in A Dangerous Crossing by Ausma Zehanat Khan. This is part of her series that I've talked about before, about the two detectives in Toronto who are part of a culturally sensitive crimes unit. I'm always really entertained by these, although I don't know if I'm going to be as entertained now, because I think part of what I was enjoying about these was that a lot of them were set in parts of Toronto, especially the eastern part of Toronto, that I missed while I was living in the US, and because I'm back here now, I don't know that it's going to have the same ring to it, because I'm not homesick in the same way. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And I think there were more, but I'm not sure where I put them, but that just seems like too many books anyway. Yeah, so that was what I picked up. If you did any Boxing Day, Boxing Week shopping, or got any gifts over the holiday season, did you get any favorites? Or any great deals? I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.